Hello, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Wherever you are on this beautiful planet of ours, welcome to Sustainability in Your Ear, the podcast conversation about accelerating the transition to a sustainable, carbon neutral society. I'm your host, Mitch Ratcliffe. Thanks for joining the conversation today. Cotapaxi is a US-based public benefit corporation and certified B Corporation founded in 2014 in Salt Lake City. It's known for its sustainably designed outdoor products, and Cotapaxi is a market leader in combining innovative gear with a solid commitment to social and environmental responsibility. Our guest today is Annie Agel. She is Cotapaxi's Vice President of Sustainability and Impact. And we're going to talk about the company's strategies for sustainable design, circular economy practices, philanthropic initiatives, and more. Cotapaxi supports education, housing, healthcare, climate solutions, and employment in impoverished communities, reportedly having helped more than 4.2 million people. The company's holistic approach to sustainability includes rigorous assessments of environmental, social, and governance risks across its entire global value chain, and it aims for net zero carbon emissions by 2040. That includes migrating all of its product designs to use recycled, repurposed, or responsibly sourced materials by 2025. You can learn more about Cotapaxi at cotapaxi.com. That's Cotapaxi, cotapaxi.com. We'll talk with Annie Agel right after this quick commercial break. Welcome to the show, Annie. How are you doing today?
Excellent, Mitch. Thank you very much for having me. It's a great honor indeed to be here.
Well, thank you. I hope that we can make it an honorable conversation. And I want to start off with a question about the 3Rs foundation for your sustainability practice, and that is, how do you build a comprehensively sustainable business on the foundation of repurposed, recycled, and responsible materials?
I think it's a critical way of looking at sustainability if you're in the textile apparel space. Our industry is one of the most ruinous in terms of its environmental practices, and it really requires benefit corporations like ours to really rethink how we foundationally approach product creation. And so having a few guidelines around what sort of materials and products we consider acceptable or preferred at Cotapaxi was an absolutely critical step in terms of our first 10 years of business. We've actually expanded the 3Rs and really are pushing towards circularity. But the idea of the 3Rs was to ensure that all of our materials and products fell into the category of repurposed, meaning we were using dead stock or remnant waste that was left over from other companies' fabric runs and was largely sitting in warehouses or was being sent to landfills or incineration, and designing from that waste instead of designing in ways that produced waste. And then really looking at credible third-party certifications to guarantee the responsible element. So working with certifications like Fair Trade, like the Global Organic Textile certification. All of these different certifications, while imperfect, I think certifications are a means to an end, not an end in and of itself. It definitely takes a step in the right directions in terms of credibility and ensuring that our products and materials are meeting a standard that's not just internal, but external. And then the final piece is recycled. Obviously, in the last 10 years, there has been a lot of exciting development in terms of innovation around sustainable textile materials. And so we always want to push ourselves as a more innovative brand to see what's out there in terms of sustainable performance materials. Recycled is a great first step towards that. So ensuring that all of our synthetics, which as an outdoor technical company, synthetics, and when I say synthetics, I mean plastic derivated materials, are unfortunately a necessary part of our material makeup. You can't make backpacks out of natural fibers currently. I think we'll be there in the next 5 years, given what we're seeing out of material innovation, but we're certainly not there yet. So that's our approach to 3Rs.
It's really interesting when you go to a Cotapaxi outlet. All the backpacks are different because you're using different combinations of materials, and that's more sustainable. There's less scrap, obviously. You're using all these different pieces that would normally be thrown away, but it creates a really unique product. I mean, none of these are the same.
Yeah, and we love that. I mean, it was interesting when we were first starting our business, everyone thought we were absolutely commercially nuts for doing that. And of course, 10 years in, now we have this cult following of customers who feel as though a company is really meeting them as individuals with their products. And I think it's been a testament to the boldness and our commitment to sustainability that we still move forward with what we call our Del Dia program, which is our very colorful repurposed collection.
It's really interesting. And building from the materials up allows you to look at a lot of different factors, emissions and so forth, which I want to talk about in a minute. But
Correct.
let's talk about the alternatives to petroleum-based textiles that you're looking at. What kinds of innovation are you working on there?
I think we're really looking holistically at it, Mitch. I think it's easy to just look at one material, but we really want to understand what's going on down the whole of our value chain. And materials is certainly a really critical piece of that. And there's a lot you can do around that. First is really formalizing our relationship with dead stock. We have created a really incredible partnership with a female-owned startup in the dead stock space called Queen of Raw, run by a phenomenal individual named Stephanie Benedetto, and really working towards, under her guidance and support, but very much in collaboration, towards a new dead stock standard. Using dead stock materials, typically dead stock materials are at least 67%, if not less, in terms of emissions of a virgin product or
Mhm.
virgin material. So it's a 27% savings at least on emissions every time you use dead stock. And of course, more than that, you're not contributing to fabric demand. And particularly for our company and for many outdoor companies, we know that the biggest source of our emissions comes from tier 2, which is the fabric production, the milling, and the dyeing process. And so it's one of the reasons we feel as passionately as we do about dead stock, because by using fabric that's already existing, we're not increasing those really tough emissions, water usage, you name it, that's occurring at tier 2. So that's our first really big commitment, is taking the 3Rs even further with an even more formal relationship and promise to use dead stock wherever possible. The other sorts of material and product innovations we're really looking at, one is really looking at upcycling. So we are launching our first upcycling collection coming out this year. And that's been really exciting. And again, our primary factory with that is a very interesting corporation in Portland called Portland Garment Factory, a female-owned benefit corporation that's here in the United States facilitating upcycling. So upcycling is really taking a material or a product of lower value, recreating it into something new and increasing its inherent value. So that's upcycling. So upcycling is really the ideal dream state in terms of what you want to do with your products. Then from there, we've also really invested, like many corporations, we're not alone on this, but we have made a very meaningful move towards re-commerce. We've always had a very strong warranty policy, and we've been providing repairs for many, many years. We've really expanded our repair options, our stewardship and care options that we provide in terms of informational videos to our customers so that they can help be better stewards of their gear, because we know that an enormous amount of emissions associated with apparel products occurs in the use phase, which we don't have any
Right.
oversight over post-sale. And then really thinking about re-commerce, how can we really start to replace sales of new items from sales of previous items? And it obviously makes business sense in the sense that in some ways you're creating a different revenue source from a sales channel, although you really want those sales to start replacing sales of new items, not just increasing the volume of sales that you have. But it also makes sense, if you can, to sell a product more than once. If you can
Sure.
sell a product 2, 3, 4 times, you're getting more bang for the buck in terms of the investment you made in the materials inputs. I think another really important piece of that is that it really forces companies, and we've definitely had some really excellent insights in terms of designing for durability. And
Mhm.
we know that designing for durability, this is one of the most important things that companies can do to improve their sustainability performance in textile apparel. It's also obviously a really big differentiator between a company like ours and say a Shein. Shein items last only on average 3 washes before they literally start to disintegrate on a human body,
Yep.
with microplastics entering human bodies, which is really troubling. We want Cotapaxi products to be able to last their warranty, which is a very long time. So we want our customers to be able to resell their items, regain some of their initial capital investment. We can resell it, have another happy customer. So really investing in those circularity touches and going beyond just materials is really what we're looking at. And we really want to be an organization that's known as a sustainable service provider. We really want our customers to feel like if they want information around sustainability, if they want to improve their sustainability performance, and having our products as a touch point, yes, but being able to go beyond that. And that's a really critical kind of move for us as a company. I personally feel that in 2024, if you're not trying to change hearts and minds of today's hyper consumer class, then you're really not focusing on what matters. And there's a role for brands to play in terms of educating consumers, in terms of the role, the really critical role that they play in helping the textile apparel sector to reduce its environmental impacts.
There is so much to unpack in what you just said. So I want to dig into a few things. And first, let's talk about the circular economy, because you mentioned that you're adding that to the 3 Rs as another driving force. One of the things what I'm hearing you say is that you're not one stop in the circular economy, like one part of this big circle, but that you actually are building a whole nested set of circular economies within Cotapaxi to accomplish different outcomes within the system. You're looking for upcycled sourcing, sourced materials. You're looking for ways to keep the product in use and reuse throughout the course of not just one, but many customers' lives. Where did that kind of complexity come from? Was it intentionally designed that way, or is that an emergent feature of trying to solve a bunch of different problems?
I think, Mitch, I mean, first of all, it came from my great team. I work with the best sustainable thinkers a girl could ever dream of in my position. And I truly feel that Cotopaxi is remarkable because we've really been able to democratize our sustainability. So without the buy-in of design, operations, our CX, our repairs and circularity ops team, our marketing and brand team, our sourcing team, this holistic move towards circularity is not possible. And I think
Yeah.
that's a really important message, is that too much of sustainability is living in ivory towers and corporations. And to be really effective, man, you gotta put your tentacles on and you gotta get comfortable getting uncomfortably cross-functional. That's really important to realize circularity. And I would say we've really built off of the foundational work that the Ellen MacArthur Foundation has built
Mhm.
out, and legitimate circularity to truly move the needle in terms of reductions, in terms of decoupling growth in the apparel sector with really problematic supply chains that are like never ending onions and nest all kinds of human rights abuses. It's really necessary to move in a very wholehearted fashion towards circularity and ensure that you're really considering every step along a product's lifestyle, but also everyone who creates, purchases, uses, resells your item. Really thinking about what is a much more complete customer cycle look like.
And the way that you engage a consumer in that process, helping them understand where something came from, how to use it. And your point about providing videos about the use phase is so important. I want to talk about that more in a moment. And then the idea of where it's going to go, which might be back to re-commerce and reuse by somebody else, or the idea that it could be recycled. How does that educational engagement also enhance your ability to market and deepen the customer relationship?
You hit the nail on the head, Mitch. I think there's so much opportunity area for brands to deepen relationships with customers around meaningful conversations around how can we be better global citizens? What is the role that we can play with our dollars in terms of investing in the right things, but also ensuring that we're backing up the way we purchase with our own personal behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
And understanding that every citizen, like every corporation, has negative impacts and positive impacts. And we really want the customer to feel good about their purchase in the sense that we're taking every step we can as a corporation to make sure that our products are ethical and sustainable. But there's definitely a role that they play, doing things like washing their garments on cold, trying to air dry as much as possible. All of these things can drastically decrease energy and water use, as well as prolong a garment's life cycle. And then really giving options and communicating on the various steps that a customer can take when they're ready to retire a piece of Cotapaxi product or any product. We really hope that our information is broad enough that a consumer will really start to consider what the end of life options are for textiles. I would say
You give them a map of the life of the product and tell them that they have the opportunity to keep it in circulation or not. And that's the choice that each of us as sustainable consumers can make.
correct. I
Yeah.
do think that's really important. And we've also looked other ways. I think one really critical area to embed in the mind of a customer that there is an environmental component of every purchase is at the cart level. And we partnered with EcoCart, which is an organization that helps us measure through life cycle analyses the carbon footprint of our products and allows a customer to invest in climate solutions that help mitigate the footprint of that product. We're no longer using the word offset or carbon neutral. I think those are kind of false ideals, but I do believe in the idea of making nature investments that correlate to our purchases. And I do think even those who feel like they can't afford that additional step, who are purchasing Cotapaxi items, at least we're sort of getting into their head this association of, oh, that's right, every purchase I make has an environmental impact, and that I have a responsibility to consider that when I shop and to consider it when I use this product. And really providing those touch points all along kind of the engagement phase with consumers to really use that time with them, to use that relationship with them, to have a little bit of a dialogue around these conversations and to inform them of what we're aware of.
There's, again, so much, and we haven't even unpacked that first answer of yours. So I want to take a quick commercial break. We're going to come right back to this fascinating conversation. Now back to the conversation with Annie Egel. She's Vice President of Sustainability and Impact at outdoor gear maker Cotapaxi. So Annie, again, there was so much that you just summarized. Unlike many companies that have to take 3 hours to pack that kind of information into their answer, you did it in about 5 minutes, and I want to continue to take that answer apart a little bit. You talked about your impact and particularly the scope 2 emissions associated with your impact, but how is your view into the scope 3 emissions in your supply chain evolving?
Oh, so important, Mitch. Thanks for bringing it up because scope 3 is where the rubber meets the road in terms of sustainability. Scope 3, for those who are not aware, all corporations now who are sustainably minded and many who are actually not are really moving in the direction of needing to measure their global greenhouse gas emissions via the Global Greenhouse Gas Protocol, the GHG protocol. So every year, Cotapaxi goes through an incredibly detailed measurement of every aspect of our company, looking at the environmental impacts of the decisions we make. like many textile apparel companies, 97+% of our emissions and environmental impacts occur in what you are referring to as scope 3, which is in the value chain. It's the emissions associated with things like your actual products and materials in their manufacturing, the energy usage of your suppliers, the emissions associated with logistics, shipping. So this is really where the big ticket items happen in terms of emissions. And of course, in America, we're such a consumer-driven society. There's a lot of focus on things like packaging. And I'm not going to denigrate focus on that because obviously packaging is incredibly important for things like waste stream management, marine biology health. But where we're really seeing the big emissions, the temperature increase moving bucket items, that's in scope 3. And I also feel really strongly that if you're not focusing on that as a sustainability officer, you are not focusing on what matters. There's also a very strong element, in my opinion, of climate justice. Many Western brands are obviously purchasing items that are being made globally around the world within suppliers, within facilities. And there's a huge opportunity area to treat your suppliers with dignity and to have a much more collaborative engagement conversation around assisting them in transitioning to renewable energy. And so that's where a lot of my time has been focused in the last 2 to 3 years, as we're really putting a lot of effort in making our SBTI reduction goals on time. There's been a lot of backstepping this year, which has been discouraging to me. We are still very committed to the ideal of SBTI, perhaps not that organization to the same extent that we were in the beginning, but we are still very committed to the necessity of reductions, and are up for that challenge. And how we're going to get that done is working with our suppliers, helping them transition to renewable energy, helping our tier 2 suppliers transition to clean heat. And so it's a really important body of work and a huge opportunity area.
So do you collaborate with the suppliers by subsidizing their migration to renewable energy? How does that work?
Yeah, correct. I would also say that this is really done in collaboration, and this is where I would say being wholehearted in your willingness to be collaborative as a corporation and actually flexing into developing and exercising that as a critical skill for sustainability is something that we really want to be a leader in. I love collaborating, and so our most effective projects for suppliers have been done in collaboration. So we were able to take our second largest tier 1, a cut-sew factory, to renewable energy with a shared pooled investment with other brands and that supplier. They were able to transition fully to solar and battery, and the energy savings for us were significant. It was around 14% for that particular supplier, and the supplier as a whole continues to build on that. So our most recent one, it was 67% of what it had been 2 years ago in terms of the energy usage for that particular supplier. And so seeing those kinds of results over the last 2 years for what was a fairly minimal investment on our part. But I do feel very strongly that Western brands have an obligation to actually put their money where their mouths are in terms of assisting their suppliers actually make these transitions. And we're also working in concert with the Outdoor Industry Association. I wish all industry associations were as effective and as issue-minded as OIA is, but we have 2 collaborations running with them, one around transitioning our principal tier 1 supplier to renewables, which also does quite a bit of webbing production, is one of the largest backpacker producers in all of the outdoor industry. So we're in good company there. So a lot of companies have come together with OIA to facilitate that transition, to really see what a renewable energy transition would look like for all of that supplier's facilities. And then we have another collaboration with OIA around working with tier 2 suppliers to develop a tool that would allow them to facilitate moving to clean heat. Not all processes can run on things like solar, so you need to look at alternatives for getting big heat. So looking at steam instead of coal burners,
Mhm.
looking at different options for how to make heat processes as clean as possible. So
Now
I'd say
you
it's a huge body of work that I'm really excited about.
and you use what you describe as a supplier code of conduct. Can you talk a little about what that consists of and how do you audit it? I know you recently completed a set of audits.
I mean, we are always auditing, and we definitely have a code of conduct. I'd say it's aligned with the American Apparel Footwear Association. That said, Mitch, I'm the first to say that there are embedded in textile apparel supply chains so many human rights issues that feel very big,
Mhm.
that one of the steps that we've taken as a corporation is to say, yes, code of conducts are important. Yes, audits are important. And we get environmental and social audits on every supplier down to tier 2. But there are many intermediaries that we're not able to audit.
Mhm.
And there are still issues that come up every year, and it breaks my heart. And we do all the things a company can do. And I'm still telling you, I don't believe any company that says they don't have human rights abuses in their supply chain if they're an apparel company. They're so embedded, and the supply chains are so convoluted to a certain extent, necessarily so. I think there's a sense that, like, well, why don't we make everything domestic? And yeah, you could probably move some cut sew factories to America, and we're certainly looking at that. But there are a lot of processes, there's a lot of materials that America's not equipped to make. And we don't have the labor force for that kind of production. And it's a real challenge, both as a brand, but more importantly for people and planet. And I'd say for us, that's why we've become really passionate advocates of the New York Fashion Act, which is really looking to hold all parties in the textile apparel space accountable for much higher standards of labor. And I think that that's really important. And it's really important to have collective action at the government level, not just at the brand level, because many of our suppliers, particularly our fabric suppliers, for example, are $20 billion companies. We are not
Yeah.
a $20 billion company. They could eat us. And so sometimes our leverage as a company is really small if and when we do detect issues with our audits. And there are a lot of known issues with audits. And so this is an area where I never want to be a Pollyanna in this area because there are egregious things happening in textile apparel supply chains, and it's impossible to combat them all. It's really going to take a much bigger global collective effort to prevent things like predatory recruitment, to prevent things like forced labor, that we know are happening, particularly in places like China, Bangladesh, elsewhere. So really important to have collective action on that one.
The complexity of the supply chain, as you point out, has allowed many companies simply to ignore
Oh, absolutely.
human rights abuses, the environmental impact of their business, the role that shipping plays, and the pollution associated with that. And you mentioned earlier the use of standards or and sharing those standards with your customers. One of the standards that you place a big emphasis on is the Science-Based Targets Initiative, SBTI. And that's become kind of a controversial certification. Has the move by the SBTI organization to become a charity given you greater confidence in that standard?
It has. I think that's always a better business model. Our primary climate partner relationship is with Change Climate,
Mhm.
formerly known as Climate Neutral, but they've done a few things that I feel exemplify what corporations should look in a company. And one of them is that it does operate as a nonprofit. It also does things like open source its estimator tool for emissions if you're not able to have what's called activity-based, like real data.
Mhm.
It allows some corporations to estimate and open source their estimator, which is very rare. And there are a lot of predatory players in the carbon space, Mitch. And I
Mhm.
mean, it's amazing, these people who reach out to me who are asking to assist us with sustainability. And if you were to look up these corporations, they would have been engaged by fossil fuel sector and had played a critical role in trying to deny the role fossil fuels were playing in climate. So, I mean, it's just there's everyone and their mother has gotten into this space, I think, and it's created a lot of mess. And I do think that SBTI was starting to experience some corporate takeover. And the reality is that every business needs to be aware that we are running up against a planetary ceiling. We are not in a sustainable relationship with our habitat, and we are diminishing our planet's ability to replenish its resources, which we all draw upon to make things. I mean, this is a really critical thing. We sometimes forget willfully in America is that everything you touch, everything you purchase, all of that came from nature. You know, plastic comes from oil, which comes from the planet. So I just think there's a really strong need for considering nature as the foundational building block for the entire modern world we live and interact with. And I do think that corporations have seen some backstepping in terms of reductions, and many corporations are just saying it's not going to happen. We're not going to do it. That's asking too much of us. And in my opinion, SBTI is still forcing corporations to make commitments that are necessary for the future of everything. Without a replenishing planet, we don't have a future as a species. And I think it's really important to understand that the foundational academic definition of sustainability, which came out in a UN academic report called the Brundtland Report in 1979,
Yep.
defines sustainability, as I'm sure you know, but perhaps the audience doesn't know, as meeting the needs of today's generation without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their need. In nowhere in that definition is mention of the term environment. It is all about having a self-sustaining species going forward. And that's truly what we're risking by business short-termism. And I do think that SBTI, while imperfect, those commitments remain critically important.
An answer that needs no further comment. I really congratulations on the commitment that you've just made again. And you know, one of the things about Cotapaxi that's interesting is its kind of mission-driven history. And in fact, your founder, Davis Smith, just recently stepped down as CEO to go spend 3 years doing a second mission as a Mormon missionary. That reflects, or I should say, is reflected in Cotapaxi's own efforts. You've got the Cotapaxi Foundation, which has helped 4 million plus people. Talk a little about how the company allocates some of its revenue and its time to serving the community.
Sure. And Mitch, thanks for asking the question. I do feel like corporate social responsibility and meaningful corporate philanthropy are conversations that have been demoted since the rise of what is being referred to as ESG or sustainability. And I still feel that it is a critical pillar that needs to be treated as something important and something that needs more accountability than what is currently being provided to corporations. And so Cotapaxi Foundation was something we launched in 2018. It was very much my baby. And it was really meant to secure for all time our commitment to placing a significant amount of our profits and at least 1% of revenue towards the foundation to award in meaningful grants to address the glaring gap between haves and have-nots. We know that we are living in the most economically unequal era in human history by some accounts. That's a hard thing to prove, but I definitely think that you can look around societies, both here in America and globally, and see that there is a gaping, completely unacceptable divide between wealthy and not wealthy, and that poverty has expanded again since COVID. It was going in the right direction for many decades, and now it's starting to go in the wrong direction again. And Cotapaxi was really founded by Davis and Stefan to be a sustainable means of alleviating poverty. So we take our philanthropy incredibly seriously at Cotapaxi and have since day one. The foundation was an instrument we put in 2018, and it actually has some very unique bylaws. We actually have as a bylaw in our contractual relationship between our foundation and the corporation that the corporation must give at least 1% of revenue to the foundation for all perpetuity. That can never be undone in the event of some corporate takeover, sale, what have you, that can never be undone. And Davis and Stefan remain our board chairs on the foundation. And unless they are, pass away unexpectedly, heaven forbid, they're enshrined there. Their efforts and their commitment to this can never be undone. So those were critical pieces for me. And then in terms of our philosophy, we take effective philanthropy at Cotapaxi really seriously. So there are a few tenets of the foundation that I think really meet best practices in what we understand to be responsible philanthropy today. One is obviously doing very effective deep vetting. And the way we find and identify organizations who are really promoting methodologies that are proven to address and eliminate poverty over time is we really reference MIT's Poverty Action Lab, which was started by two Nobel Peace Prize winners who had really applied economics and scientific methodologies to really demonstrate which kinds of interventions were leading to economic improvement for communities that had been struck with the blight of poverty. And there's some excellent findings in there, and I'm very pleased that we're able to reference that kind of level of scientific rigor when we place our investments in community partners. We also believe really strongly in having long-term grants. So our longest term grant has been with us for 10 years with the International Rescue Committee, which focuses on refugee assistance. But we believe in 10-year grants of 3 to 5 years, and many of our major grantees go longer. This has been shown through studies to be critically important to not just write a one-time check, because effective humanitarian programs require community investment that can be relied upon for many years in sequence. And addressing systemic issues requires long-term investments that can be counted upon. And then the final piece that is really a foundational pillar is trust-based philanthropy. 5 years ago, there was a huge move by corporations of only wanting to sponsor programs. Well, you don't get effective philanthropy programs without committed staff members. And so if you're not also willing to invest in organizational overhead, good luck really being able to get the kind of monitoring and evaluation you want to determine a grant's effectiveness. You need to invest in people. You can't just invest in interventions. And so that's where the trust-based philanthropy for us comes into play. We want to ensure that many of our investments are supporting staff and organization overhead, not just interventions. And so that's just kind of the criteria of our organization. And we would love to see more corporations lean more wholeheartedly into effective philanthropy.
Well, and that hope is shared here. Obviously, we believe that what you're describing is the path out of the crisis that we exist in, and it's a polycrisis, one involving the environment, poverty, inequity, and we have the opportunity to really design a future that we can pass along that is going to preserve resources for future generations, as the Brundtland Commission described. I mean, and I want to congratulate you on such an all-encompassing approach to thinking about sustainability as a business. Where would you suggest that our listeners start learning more about Cotapaxi and the way it does business?
Sure. For me, it's our impact report. If you want to really get a sense of where we are in our sustainability journey, but also where we fall short, I always feel like, the list that matters to me isn't the list of things we've gotten to, it's the list we haven't gotten to yet. And I can assure any corporation out there who might feel like they're just starting their journey. Any truly decent organization has the humility to have the mindset that they're just beginning their journey. And I would say reading our impact report, hopefully in there you can get a sense of where we're at, and you can also see what we're still working on, and then hopefully find some inspiration or some ways in which maybe you can get engaged either as a citizen customer or as a fellow corporation around this incredibly important work around addressing these poly problems, like you said.
Well, Annie, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you for having me, Mitch, truly.
That was my conversation with Annie Agel. She's Vice President of Sustainability and Impact at Cotapaxi. Their outdoor gear represents a thoughtful, reflective approach to responsible business design and processes. You can learn more about the company at cotapaxi.com. Annie hit on so many of the issues we've heard from previous guests, and in a concentrated and complete way that few business leaders are able to encapsulate in a brief conversation. Her key point that a company and consumer can collaborate to understand and minimize the impact of their actions on the environment while improving the lives of workers and benefiting society should be carved in our minds. That is, that everything we touch and buy comes from nature and, may I add, must return to nature. Circularity, the use of repurposed, recycled, and responsibly sourced materials and products is the catalyst for a new, deeper relationship with customers, and for customers, the path to establishing real accountability from companies. To begin their evolution, to become part of a transparent, circular economy, a company can build internal commitments to the principles of circularity, sustainability, and environmental and social regeneration. Cotapaxi, of course, was built from the ground up to meet these high goals, but any company can transform itself. It just takes the first step, and that's beginning the critical self-examination, the self-reflection that thoughtful leaders can apply to their business. Do it at planning time. Just take the extra steps. And each of us, as individual citizens, we can ask companies and governments to engage in a thoughtful and transparent dialogue with us about our shared impact. Those are just a few of the actions that we can take as companies and as individuals. And here's one you can take right now, an action to share this podcast or any of the more than 480 interviews that we produced on sustainability in your ear. Folks, if you take a moment to write a review on your favorite podcast platform, it will help your neighbors find us. You are the amplifiers that spread more ideas so we can create less waste. So please tell your friends, family, and coworkers that they can find us on Apple Podcast, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, or their favorite purveyor of podcast goodness. Thanks, folks, for your support. Hey, I'm Mitch Ratcliffe. This is Earth911's Sustainability in Your Ear, and we will be back with another innovator interview soon. In the meantime, folks, take care of yourself, take care of one another, and let's all take care of this beautiful planet of ours. Have a green day.